Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lepre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Lepre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. Today on episode 54, I'm continuing my job interview series where I feature a principal from a school in the U.S., and I talk to them about education in general, but specifically I ask them what they look for when they're interviewing candidates, and then they have a mock interview with me, and so you get to hear the types of questions that they would ask, and you can see how I do, considering that I haven't interviewed for a job in quite some time. But I wanted to give you some insight in terms of the types of questions that you'll get so that you're prepared for anything. So I started this series with episode 52, which I released on a Monday. And then I also did another episode, almost like a bonus episode, episode 53, on a Thursday. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the month of April in 2019. I am releasing 2 episodes per week. So at the time of this episode being released, it's a Monday, so come back on Thursday or check your favorite podcast player on Thursday for the next one. The reason why I'm doing this and doing the extra work to release episodes twice a week is I want you to be as ready as fast as possible for interview season. Honestly, every district and every school is different in terms of when they start interviewing, but a lot of schools start interviewing as early as May. And so you can spend the month of April getting yourself ready for those hard interview questions. And of course, you want to practice how you would respond. You want to practice in a way so that you can make yourself nervous, if that makes sense. Kind of like a real life situation. Maybe practice your answers in front of other people because you might feel kind of silly answering these questions in front of other people. But the more that you can get over that feeling of nervousness, the more your real personality and your qualifications will shine.
I'm Jennifer Gonzalez from the Cult of Pedagogy podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com. And get ready, because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Today, I have an amazing guest, Scott Schwartz, who is an administrator in the Deerfield Public School District in Illinois. He was previously principal at Walden Elementary and has recently been promoted to assistant superintendent for teaching, learning, and innovation in his district. This interview became surprisingly awesome as I learned that the entire kindergarten through 8 district uses standard space grading, which I personally use and am a proponent and supporter of. Scott and I definitely talk about grading and teaching philosophy, as well as the database hiring system his district uses to find the best teachers. You definitely want to listen to this episode for the interview questions and feedback Scott provides. Here's my conversation with Scott. I do want to talk about the hiring process because my listeners are brand new teachers or they're about to be a teacher and they're trying to look for a job. So if they were coming to your city and your district and they wanted to apply, what would you be looking for if you were on the hiring committee? Or what is the process? You had mentioned something about it sounded almost like a vetting process. Could you explain that to me?
Sure. So it's a pretty extensive process. And the way I'd sum it up is that it's very scientific, which is very unique because most hiring systems are based on a gut feeling approach. And they're frankly based on the wrong, or emphasis is placed on the wrong thing. So let me explain. 2 things that you would get from a resume would be someone's experience and their education. Right? Education experience. And oftentimes districts prioritize those 2 things. Is they look at someone's master's degree in reading and they they value that. Or they look at someone's 5 years of experience at a different school and they value that. And not to say that those things aren't important, but is that going to automatically equate to maximizing student achievement in that teacher's classroom if you happen to hire them?
Right.
It might, but it also doesn't guarantee it. So what my district does is we bring science into it. We partner with a firm called HumanX. It's an excellent firm out of Lincoln, Nebraska. They also have a headquarters in Kalamazoo, Michigan. But HumanX is a firm that we partner with, and they have done the research and created phone screeners that seek out talent, which is going to be the innate, consistent patterns of thought of the candidates. We have a method now of identifying the innate beliefs, the core values of these candidates, and then again their consistent patterns of thought. That allows us to make a much higher prediction about that candidate's success rate if we end up hiring them or when we end up hiring them.
So if I apply, I'm going to go through a phone screening first.
So when you apply, you're going to complete the online application. That's standard. But what we have as a part of our application online is what we call a student profile builder. And it asks a variety of questions. I think it's 44 questions. I think that's the updated version. And they're timed. It's a timed, I think it's a 44 question screener. And it asks a variety of different questions from within all aspects of education. So things about student discipline, things about parent communication, things about collegiality, things about your drives and values, things about how your work style, how flexible are you, things like that. And at the end of that, we get a student-centered score and a teacher-centered score. So that's actually the first thing we look at. And I'll go back to the science behind it. We're looking for candidates that have a high student-centered score and a low teacher-centered score.
Right.
From there, we identify the candidates that we want to screen. It's a phone screener, so we minimize any bias, or we limit any bias that might exist if you're seeing someone in person. I have no idea what they look like, if but it's really important because all I'm interested in is listening to their words. I'm listening to the answers they're giving to a strategic set of questions. And then from there, people that do well on that screener are recommended for the next rounds. And then the next rounds, I can go into that later if you want to ask more questions about this.
Now, as I'm listening to this process, I'm wondering, do you still get a large number of applicants considering all the hoops that they have to jump through?
Well, they don't necessarily know the hoops they have to jump through. The answer is yes, we get a lot of candidates.
Okay.
We're what you would call a destination district. It's a very good community. We've got a lot of resources. Like I mentioned, pretty affluent community, and the local tax base provides the majority of our funding.
Okay.
And so we'll get 300 or 400 applicants for every position. They don't necessarily know the steps that they have to go through after that initial application,
right?
But they're all willing to do it, because they want a job.
And I can only imagine that then you're getting the perfect fit for each school, or a near perfect fit for each school.
The fit component would be the last few rounds of our interview process.
Right.
So if the first round is that the application, so we do a review of the application, we're looking at their background, we're looking at their student-centered and teacher-centered scores. If that's the first round, the second round is the phone screener. At this point, we're not looking for fit. We're really only looking for talent.
Okay.
We're looking for talent, people that are predictive of excellence. Because at the end of the day, what we like to think about is how many of your teachers, K-12, were excellent, awe-inspiring, the best ever. If you have an average of 80 teachers, K-12, the answer might be one or two. And so our thinking is we want to hire that excellent, awe-inspiring, best ever teacher every single time we have a vacancy. Because as a principal, at the end of the day, that's the most important thing that I can do. I'm busy. Principals have a lot on their plate, but I would be hard-pressed to find something more important than the decisions you make about the teachers that you put into your classrooms, because the teachers are the ones that have the direct impact on kids. Can I share one more piece of science, though, behind our thinking?
I'm
All right.
definitely fascinated with how you guys do this.
the screener we use is based off of 50 years of research, and it's influenced by personality theories that come from like industrial, organizational, and psychological research. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned, it finds and predicts excellence, right? So we asked this screener, and then the personality traits that we're looking for, these are the 5. You have conscientiousness, and you can imagine, you could probably agree that the people that have these personality traits are the type of teachers you want working in your building.
Right.
Or that you want to be working with as a teacher. So number 1, they're conscientious. Number 2, they're agreeable. And that's on a spectrum. So conscientiousness to not conscientious to not conscientious, or agreeable to disagreeable. Research and science would tell you that those are the 2 most important personality traits when determining an employee's success. That's not just teachers, any employer, any industry.
Okay.
After that, you've got 3 more, which is open-mindedness. And again, on that spectrum to close-mindedness, you have emotional stability to emotional instability. And again, just think about that. If you end up hiring a teacher who's emotionally unstable, that's not good for kids.
Right.
That's not good for collegiality, the culture of the building, the climate of the building. So, and then the last one would be extroversion versus introversion. And people tend to have a hard time with that one because there's a lot of candidates who say, well, wait a minute, I'm pretty introverted. Does that mean I'm not? Does that mean that I wouldn't make a good teacher? And the answer is no, not at all. The way I think about introversion is to a flaw, to a fault, where it is you are so introverted that you can't even interact and communicate with other humans because you've got such social anxiety. Right. And versus extroversion, it's the same thing on one end of the spectrum. It doesn't mean that that we're only hiring people that are the life of the party. That's not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is, we want to hire people that know how to work with kids, obviously, but also work with parents, work with staff, work with administration. So those 5 things. So now the next step, again, going back to the science, is that when we can identify using the screener, we can seek out talent, and we can seek out candidates who are predictive of excellence. That's 50% of the pie. And this is based on research. That's 50% of the pie. That's 50%. Someone's talent, someone's innate core beliefs makes up 50% of the amount of success that candidate will eventually bring to that job. 25% is fit. So you had alluded to this earlier. So after we seek out candidates that are predictive of excellence, we are then looking for fit. Are you going to work? Would you work here at our school, Deerfield District 109, more specifically Walden Elementary School, more specifically the 3rd grade team? Right. Every team has a different feel. Every school has a different feel. And so that's 25%. The remaining 25% is split up evenly, 12.5% education and 12.5% experience. So what that's indicating is that education and experience do matter, but they don't matter as much as talent and fit.
Okay.
That is some of the research behind the decision making that we use in our hiring decisions.
And I think that makes it a little more objective, it seems like, especially because when I've interviewed people, it's yes, I can go on my gut feeling, but my gut feeling has been wrong. And maybe someone either put on a good show or they couldn't show their personality because of nervousness. Yep. And so we didn't get to really see them shine during that time. So it sounds like it leaves very little to chance in terms of that type of an error.
Well, that's exactly right. And candidates they're always they're still going to be nervous, and sometimes their personality doesn't come out, but we have a deeper understanding of who they are as a person before we even meet them in person. And so as a principal, in theory, I still have an opinion, and the decision still has to lie with the principal. But in theory, if I bring 4 candidates to the table, they're all predictive of excellence. They've all been through these initial screeners. And I can really rely on my teacher input teams to say, who would you like to work with? Because I know that whichever 4 of those candidates we choose, when they're in a situation in the classroom next year, after the year starts, they're going to probably, very likely, handle that situation correctly. Right. So as a principal, I can't be with the new teacher 24/7. Right. of course, I'm going to support them. I'm going to be their cheerleader, and I'm going to help them and coach and mentor and do everything I have to do for them. But I can't be there 24/7. So they're going to get that parent email that challenges a decision that they made. I have a tool that allows me to know that the person we hire is going to handle that situation properly.
Right.
Versus the teacher who either I have no idea or they're going to handle it poorly. Right. I'd rather have a system in place that I can hire a teacher and I can know, because this is their innate, deep-rooted beliefs at their core, that they're going to handle that properly. They're going to listen to the parent, and they're going to try to, they're going to problem solve together, and they're going to work together in effort, in support of the student. Right.
It just comes It comes naturally to them. It's not something you have to teach them to do.
Exactly. Kim, you just said it. The innate core beliefs, you can't teach. I can tell you that collaborating with parents is important, but if you don't believe it, then it's not going to matter. I could tell you that being flexible, right? And, and like sometimes you got to change your schedule to accommodate, an assembly or something. I could tell you that that's important, but if that really catches you off guard and you can't handle that, it's going to be tough to work with you.
Yeah.
I could teach you Common Core standards. I could teach you classroom management skills. There's plenty that you'll learn on the job. You actually alluded earlier to the new teacher that's going into the classroom. There's a million things that they're going to learn that year, and we're going to be there to support you and help you. But there are many things that I can't teach you. I just need you to have them innately.
Right. They need to come with it already.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's just who they are at their core. It's just who they are.
So let's pretend like I passed the first half.
Great.
And so now I'm one of the 300 people who applied for a position at Walden. What are some of the questions that you would ask me?
All right. So I've got 5 here that I wrote down. So tell me about a difficult circumstance that you handled. What action did you take, and what were the results?
I actually had a parent who did not like how I was using assigning reading with our district program Achieve 3000. So I have a population with about 50% students with IEPs in my classes. And so I have to break down how much reading they do per week. Because if I tell them you need to read 40 articles by the end of the semester, they'll never get there, or they'll try to read all 40 the last week before the semester. Mm-hmm. So this parent was also a teacher in the district and who didn't agree with the program, and she didn't like how I split it up, because she said that it left too much for the student to have to handle and be responsible for and track, and then it also gave her homework because she had to make sure that he did it. And so it was a pretty inflammatory email, and I typically don't get those because I work well with parents. Mm-hmm. So in that situation, I didn't respond, because I know that when we get these aggressions or microaggressions, we're not thinking at our best. So I did ask another colleague to take a look at it, because I didn't know if it was just me reading into it and getting an emotional response for it, or if it was off base. So after we agreed that it was a little bit off base, then I sought advice from my administrator, because I didn't want to respond in a way where the parent could nitpick what I was saying and use that against me. So I asked for help, and we were able to resolve it together in a diplomatic fashion. But it definitely taught me to be even more thorough in terms of, proofreading my emails, because looking back, I looked at the original email, I realized, maybe I could have worded it differently so that it would be easier to understand, and so that there wouldn't be anything that might set a parent off. So I use situations like that as a learning experience in terms of how I can offer almost like better customer service with families, because I definitely want buy-in from the parents.
So I was taking notes when you were speaking. So number one, I love that it was very specific, right? It was a specific example. I can close my eyes and I can picture this email that you're getting, and I can picture you, the reaction that you had. I can picture you speaking with other teachers and your principal. It was a very good, specific laid out example. Number two, I actually like I like your vulnerability. I'm not scared of being vulnerable in front of colleagues. I think it's actually endearing. And so I like that. I like that you were able to share it with confidence. I love that you touched on the emotionally stable response. You didn't want to just shoot off an email right away. You wanted to think about it. You knew you had to get back to her probably within 24 hours,
right.
The mom, but you knew that it was important to take a step back, think things through, and respond professionally. That was great. And then this is probably the biggest thing is you touched on resolving it together with the parent. That is huge. That is so huge. We, as teachers, we can't forget that as much as we do know our kids, there's no way we'll ever know more than our parents know about their children.
Right.
There's just no way. And so even if you professionally disagree with a parent, they're coming at it from a perspective that you have to try to understand, and then you have to create the problem together. And I love sharing this with my new teachers. This is really good advice. When you have any parent situation, this question was asking about a difficult situation, but any parent situation, if you can create the solution together, how great, because let's say it doesn't work. Let's say the solution doesn't work. The parent can no longer be mad at you because they were a part of that solution.
Right.
So they could say, well, it's kind of both our faults. All right, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's figure out what else we could try now because that didn't work. It wasn't this combative, like, well, I told you so. I told you that wasn't going to work. Right. So I guess if there was any feedback on that answer, it was a great answer. The one thing I would be looking for more evidence of is you as the teacher listening and working hard to understand the parent's perspective.
Okay.
That's not a criticism of your answer. Your answer was great. But if I was going to find anything, I would have loved to have seen you say how, look, I have to really understand where the parent's coming from. I disagreed with them. But I really want to get their perspective on this before we move forward.
Well, and especially I can see with a newer teacher who only did student teaching and maybe haven't had that experience yet, they can also say what they would do if something like that came up.
Oh, no question. Absolutely. There's questions we ask that they might not have had that situation, but if they talk about what they would do, that's totally fine.
Oh, good. Okay.
Totally fine. Yep, absolutely. All right. What is the difference between a good teacher and a great teacher?
I think a good teacher can deliver content. They can assess their students. They understand data. They know how to run their classroom, and they'll probably have good classroom management, and they probably have good rapport in general with their colleagues, their students, and the parents. But a great teacher has this innate, I want to use your word, this innate understanding of students' needs, and they go the extra step to build rapport with the students. So it's not just, you like me as a teacher and I like you as a student, but I create an environment where you feel safe to take risks and be wrong and know that you're not going to be laughed at, you're not going to be reprimanded or humiliated by me, but I'm going to pull something from you, something out of you that you've been hiding because of past experiences, and I'm going to empower you to do things that you didn't even think you were capable of, and we're going to celebrate when you actually achieve those things.
So let me ask a follow-up.
Okay.
You talked about, I'm going to have you do things you didn't even know you were capable of. Can you tell me more about that?
Right. So a lot of students, especially because I teach English, which is reading and writing, they think that they can't write. They'll say, I suck at writing. And I get that all the time because I do a survey in the beginning of the year that asks them about their strengths and weaknesses in English language arts. And I prove to them that they don't. And I also prove to them that they can improve even more and that they can actually exceed their own expectations. That I already see that they're actually fine and that, where they're at is fine. I don't want them to feel like they're less than. I want them to feel like this is where I'm at. And guess what? I'm going to get you here and we're going to work together. And even though you don't believe you can, I'm going to show you that you can. So you didn't think that you could write a 5-paragraph essay without my help. And by the end of the grading period, all of a sudden they're doing it without my help. And I don't say, well, this isn't quite 7th grade level, but you're getting there. I just tell them, hey, you just wrote a 5-paragraph essay. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. It was, again, great answer. Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
answer. The reason I asked that follow-up, I wasn't planning on it, but because you said it, you touched on it, I just wanted to hear more. But it was a great answer. You talked about the definition of the good teacher was great. And I think the way to sum that up is if there's 300 applicants, there's 250 that are good, right? Really good. 250 that will be just fine in the classroom, and kids will like them, and parents might like the teacher, and life goes on, right? But if I'm hiring that great teacher, I love that additional explanation that you gave. And then that follow-up was key, because my opinion is great teachers, they have higher expectations for their kids. And that's how you get more out of your kids. That's how you get them to do more than the kid thought they were able to do, is that the teacher has a rigor to their class, to their lessons, and the kids get pushed harder.
Right.
That to me is a significant difference between good and great. So I think you got there.
Yay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. A student in your class consistently causes disruptions. Explain the steps you take to help the child and maintain your positive classroom environment.
Considering that I teach 7th grade, I know that when a student is consistently misbehaving, that there's something behind it. And I think a lot of teachers assume that, the student is just inherently bad, that they haven't learned right from wrong. And so I know that usually there's something going on. So they're either disengaged because they're bored, because they are hiding the fact that they don't understand and don't want to lose face, because something is going on at home and they can't concentrate, or maybe especially in 7th grade, some kind of drama at school. So rather than reprimanding them, especially in front of others, but rather than reprimanding them, I will employ things like proximity. I will walk over there, and usually if you're standing right by them, they're less likely to do something, just to sort of calm it down in the moment without having to confront them. And so I move around a lot as it is, but I will head over to their area just to get them to stop. And then when everyone is working, I'll crouch down or pull them aside, and we'll have a talk about it, because I want to get to the bottom of it. And if it's, I'm really tired, I had a game that went into overtime until 9, and then Mr. So-and-so made me do this homework, and I was up late, and I'm just having a really hard time. Or, as often is the case in my classes, I forgot to take my meds this morning and I can't concentrate. Then we talk about a way to have them redirect and find a way to get some of the assignment done and be a little bit less disruptive. And if it happens again and again, then I find that I might have to, just temporarily, without any kind of emotion, I'll relocate them and say, I think you might concentrate better over here. Let's make a better decision by going over here just for now, so you can get your work done and you won't have homework.
I love it.
Thank you.
I love it. So there was a really good example. That answer had more evidence of you listening to the child, like really trying to understand what was going on. Like we mentioned in the first question, your answer there got to that listening piece, which was great.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then at the end, I love how you got to the place where you're talking about helping them make better decisions in the future. Right. Like you alluded to this. Kids in general they're not misbehaving for no reason. There's something behind it. And it's our job as a teacher to figure out what that is, and then to help them make better decisions next time. Right. So I love how you got there as well. That was a great answer.
Thank you. And I also know, especially with classroom management, at the secondary level, I think we forget to teach kids how to behave. We make assumptions that by the time they get to us, they already know, they should know, the rules. That's what elementary is supposed to teach them, is how to behave. But I find that there's so much going on hormonally. There's so much going on with just that age and their development, that you have to retrain them, but in a way where they feel like they still have choice, and they feel like they still have some sense of power because they want to be, independent, but they still want us to hold their hand. I'm sure you remember that from teaching 7th grade, where it's this weird dichotomy between those two worlds. And we have to help them navigate through that so they can be, productive students and citizens.
Absolutely. I do remember that vividly. And I'll add to that. I remember also parents would tell me a lot that they wanted 7th grade to be the year where they stopped overseeing so much and they wanted the child to be a little bit more independent. And, it was probably a 50-50 split. There were plenty of kids who were ready for that and they could handle school without their parents checking their backpack every night. But then there was half the kids who still needed mom and dad to be there to make sure that they were keeping up on things and getting this paper signed and doing this. And, it's that really interesting, crucial year, like you just mentioned.
Right.
Yeah. My wife teaches 8th grade.
Okay.
And so she talks all the time. She'll say to the kids, you guys have been in school this is your 9th year of school, kindergarten included. And pretty sure you guys know how to behave in school, right?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, good. Okay, good. Let's move on.
Yeah.
All right. Do you believe that placing a 0 in the grade book teaches responsibility?
No, I think that a 0 is completely demoralizing, and a 0 means you know absolutely nothing about this topic. As in, you weren't here, or you purposely covered your ears while I gave instruction, or you took a nap when we were working on this. 0 means nothing. It means you know nothing. So I see 0s when placed in a grade book as a punishment. It's when teachers want to use grading to punish students for not being compliant. So that means they didn't meet the deadline, they didn't do the assignment, or it's not finished. So there have been times when I've had a student partially complete an assignment, but I didn't give them a 0 because they didn't finish it. I looked at what they did and I looked for evidence of learning and I graded them accordingly. And some teachers think, well then what's to motivate a student to complete the assignment? And in my mind, especially let's say like science or math, if there's 50 questions and the 20 that I did demonstrate to you that I know the standard, then do you really need to give me a 0 because I didn't finish? But that's a philosophical thing.
But that's right. But yeah, that's exactly why I would ask that type of question, because most people say no to that question, which is good. But there are candidates that would say, yes, I think it's really important. It teaches them responsibility and they have to learn somehow. And, there's consequences to your actions. There are those candidates out there, but I promise you, those are not the candidates that are going to be working in my school.
Right.
They're just not. There's a million ways to teach responsibility. It does not have to be in the grade book.
Well, and right? I relate it to real life. So if I miss my flight, it doesn't mean I don't ever get to fly again. It just means that I have to pay a fee to get on the next flight. And so when people say that, you need to learn real life, well, very few times in real life, unless we're talking about 3 strikes you're out in California, very few times is it, a zero-sum game.
Right. Even our entire prison system, if you want to go to worst case scenario, it's the Department of Corrections, right? It's the whole system is about helping these criminals learn from their mistakes. Yes, there's consequences to your actions. Learn from your mistakes, though, and then don't make the mistake again. It's not like, well, you're done. Your life is over. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I obviously agree with that statement, and it actually leads in. It leads into the final question.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about it earlier. Describe your understanding of what a standards-based learning environment looks like.
Well, especially in English, with Common Core, there are quite a few standards. There's a lot to check off if you're teaching in that way. But for me, in a standards-based classroom, it's about the skills that they can apply to all of their subjects. Nothing drives me more crazy than a student who can't write a summary in science or history, even though they can write a perfect summary in my class. So for me, with my particular subject, I strive to have them demonstrate these real life applicable skills, and also the type of analysis that makes them grow as a thinker, as a reader. So we're talking about reading analysis, and even when someone's giving, for example, like an argumentative speech or a TED Talk, analyzing, the speaker's moves and their motives and biases. But overall, I want to teach them things that aren't so nitpicky with checking off boxes, but more things that are big picture. And so that's how I grade too, is I grade more holistically. So when I get an assignment, I don't check off 5 different standards. I'm focusing on maybe 1 or 2 so that I can give more effective feedback on that. And I think especially with standards-based grading, feedback is essential, because if we're grading on a scale of 1 to 4, the student needs to know why they earned a 2. Because if they were in a typical grading environment, a 2 would be, a C or a D. But to me, a 2 means you still need me to give you direction in order to complete this assignment. How can we get to a 3 where you can mostly do it on your own? So to me, that's how I do standards-based grading.
Yeah, I love it. I love how you got to the formative assessment component of that. Right? Like how imperative it is that in teaching today, in classrooms today, teachers should have a pretty good understanding of where their children are at. And the hard part is, you mentioned it, it's the number of standards that exist. I'm not saying that's not easy, but the best teachers at my school can answer that. They know where their kids are at according to the various standards, and they are working very strategically and purposely to help the children on that list. I would add one thing to this isn't criticism, but just you were about to get there. You talked about like a child who has a 2 and they're getting to a 3. In my community, we're very high achieving. We've got a lot of high achieving students. And so I would add that it's prudent of me as the teacher to provide my kids the opportunity to get to the 4.
Okay.
Now what that looks like is going to be, there's a million different ways to kind of answer that question. Like, what exactly does that look like? Right. But, a 4 for us is exceeding the standard. It is so crucial that the teacher gives the child the opportunity to exceed. And that goes actually back to the other question about, having a rigorous learning environment.
Right.
Right. I mean, I can skirt by and my kids can get 3s very easily, but do I know where their ceiling is? Do I know how high they can go? Because I've given them those opportunities. The answer to that question is really important.
I think with my particular grading scale, and the reason why I said a 2 to a 3, and maybe, well, actually, it doesn't have anything to do with that. But with my grading scale, a 4 is actually grade level for me. And I do this because at the middle school level, it's a mind thing. And the parents don't know that there is a such thing for me as a 4+, which means exceeding. But the problem with standards-based grading isn't necessarily the teachers, it's the parents and their beliefs from how they were graded. And so they put an unnecessary amount of pressure and create anxiety and depression in their students because their students can't get a 4 in elementary school because 4 means exceeding. So if they can meet grade level standard for me, I give them a 4. But especially for my accelerated students, They would get a 4+, and it takes the pressure off of the students because now their parents aren't hounding them. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like I had to adjust that because I just couldn't train the parents. It is what it is, and I'm Filipino, and I had parents who were always trying to extract the best from me that way, and there's also competition among my peers, and students now have anxiety more than ever. So I try to mitigate that with my grading system.
Yeah. That's great. So, and that's a core difference between our system. The 4 here stands for exceeding standards.
Right.
A 3 is meeting, and then a 2 and a 1 are variations of not yet meeting the standard.
It's actually that way at the elementary school that feeds into my district as well. So I made that switch because the kids were talking about how they were being pressured by their parents to get 4s all the time, and especially in middle school, because a 4 means A to them. They are attaching percentages and letter grades to that grading scale, which drives me crazy.
Well, it's true. And that there's an unlearning component that our kids have to go through as well. Right. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. I hope I did okay.
You did great. You did great. Absolutely. You did wonderful. Absolutely. No question.
So if this is something that's up someone's alley who's listening to this episode, where can they find more information about your district?
dps109.org.
Okay.
Every school has promotional videos, which I highlight only because I think they do a great job of showing, what we're all about and the specific culture of each school. But yeah, DPS stands for Deerfield Public Schools, so dps109.org. You can also check out #Engage109 on Twitter. Everyone uses it from our district when they're tweeting. It's the portal to see, everything about our district. We've had it for about 5 years now, and it is really, it's really successful. I mean, every teacher in our district, they just get, it's just every tweet that they post goes to #Engage109. Now, a lot of our schools also have school hashtags. So, for example, #WAL109, WAL109. My school is Walden. So, the teachers here, every time they tweet, same with me, they tweet out and then they say #Engage109, #WAL109. Again, WAL109. So that's happened at the school level. And then what's really neat is teachers have taken that to the next level. And they'll create a class hashtag.
Oh.
Their parents love that because they can go to that hashtag and there's a pretty good chance that they'll see their kid, on Twitter. So it's pretty cool.
And then how about for yourself? Where can they find you?
I'm at Scott Schwartz. So at SCASCHWA.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
That's on Twitter.
I'll make sure to put that in my show notes so that if any of my listeners want to reach out to you, they can.
Thank you.
So
thank you
again, and congratulations on your amazing promotion. I can already tell that your district is amazing, so I can't wait to see what else you're going to do to push them even more into being innovative.
I really appreciate you reaching out. It was fun.
I think we can all agree that there was so much value in my interview with Scott. We were both very open and honest and very real about why we think that things need to change in education and how we have to unlearn a lot of things and how we can move forward to do what's best for students. And really, that's what this is all about, is what is the best for students and maybe not necessarily what is the easiest for teachers. So here are my key takeaways from this interview. First, with the right leadership, it is possible for an entire district to embrace forward thinking and change. Not necessarily change for the sake of it, but one that can move students forward in terms of academic growth. Also, there are objective and database methods to select an ideal candidate for a school. While Deerfield Public Schools has a very rigorous application process, I want you guys to know that it's just one possible way to hire teachers, so I don't want you to get discouraged if you don't think you'd pass through that process. Remember, this is just one district of many in our country. It's definitely good and important to get to know the ethos and culture of the district in which you're applying. So in Deerfield Public Schools, they are completely standards-based. So that's something that you'd want to know ahead of time because you want to be sure that it aligns with your own core beliefs, or you have to be willing to be flexible and adapt. Finally, in order for real change and progress to happen in our schools, we're going to have to unlearn how things have always been done. It takes an honest and open-minded conversation with your peers and with the community to reach a consensus on what is the best course of action for students. So I really hope that you got a lot of value out of today's interview. My mind was just blown away by everything that we discussed, and I know that I also learned a lot, and it affirmed a lot of the beliefs that I already had. So I really appreciate you listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. I'm having a great time with this series, and I hope that you're enjoying it. If you have any questions in terms of how to answer one of these questions, or if you'd like some individualized tips or feedback on your interview skills, please feel free to email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Don't forget to tune in on Thursday for the next episode in this series. Thanks for being here, you guys. Have a fabulous week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.